Okay, so how do we calculate the empirical formula of something if we're given the molecular formula? That's what we're going to try to do today. So the empirical formula is just the smallest ratio that a chemical formula has, and this just helps tell us what kind of atoms are inside a molecule and the different elements that it contains. And so this is really simple. All we need to do is find the greatest common factor that we can divide these subscripts by. So the biggest number that we can divide evenly all of these numbers and get our smallest ratio of whole numbers that we're going to need. And so let's go ahead and do an example of this. So in this case right here, we have C6H12O6. So this is the molecular formula, right? The atoms that make up, the different elements that make up this molecule. And so how do we find the empirical formula? We're just going to divide. So by 6 is going to be our greatest common factor here. So divide these subscripts. We get CH2O, right? So divide by 6. 6 divided by 6 is going to be 1. So just C in the imaginary 1 for 1 carbon. H divided by 6 is going to be 2. And then O divided by 6 is also 1. So CH2O is going to be our answer for this first molecule when going from molecular to the empirical formula. And so over here we have C2H6O2, our our greatest common denominator that we can divide this by is going to be 2. So C, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So C1, H6 divided by 2 is H3. And then O1, so the imaginary 1 once again. So we have CH3O is going to be the empirical formula for this molecule. And let's see over here. So H2O, this is water. What is going to be our empirical formula? Well, our greatest common denominator that we can divide this by is going to be 1, right? So H2 and O, the imaginary 1. So we could just divide this all by 1, but it would end up being the same thing. So in this case, and for some other molecules as well, we can have the same formula for our molecular and empirical formula. They can have the same formula, and that's okay. And that just tells us the ratio, and so that could be a correct answer. And then lastly, we have this example, C6H16N2. And so it looks like our greatest common factor is going to be 2 here. So dividing everything by 2, we have C3, right? 6 divided by 2, H8, and then N1. So our imaginary 1, just for 1 nitrogen. And so that's how you go from molecular formula to an empirical formula.